The council meeting, our first meeting back for the 22nd of February. Jeff's going to lead us. We're going to join in.
Kia ora everybody, welcome back. Toru whā. Whakatakata ki te uru. Whakatakata ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta. Kia mā tātara ki tai. E hi ake ana te atakura. He tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei, mauri ora. Go the Black Caps.
Thank you very much. We've got noted that we think Tucker is away, so we won't move and second that. We'll just have a note of that. We've got Wendy Walker joining us online, still with a sore back at home. Welcome, Wendy. We've got no public forum this morning. No conflicts of declarations. Anyone got anything to declare? No. Confirmation of minutes from the 14th of December. I'll move them to put them on the table, seconded by Councillor Ford. Any issues for anybody? No? All those in favour? Those against? Carried. I haven't done a mayor's report, but I will say we had a great Waitangi Day with about 30,000 people. And I would welcome Jim Toka and Mike Mendoza to the council. So nothing from Taku. We've got no petitions, no recommendations. So we move to our first report, the Climate Change Adaptation 11.1. Moved by, so I'll put it on the table, moved by Councillor Trillin. Open for discussion. Do we want any comments from staff? Yes, could you come to the table? Who's doing the climate change report? Thank you. Josh.
Yeah, really glad that we are getting this through. No particular issues, just some clarification around the timeline. So we're agreeing to initiate phase 1. What's our anticipated timeline in terms of rollout of phase 2 and 3 when we're going to actually get out for consultation?
Kia ora, thank you. So we're looking to complete phase 1, which is looking at the impact of climate hazards on council assets by the end of June this year. We anticipate that it will show that there are probably a few gaps in the information that we have, and so we'll work to address those once we get to the end of phase 1. We have heard the Minister of Climate Change saying that an adaptation framework is in the works at the moment, so we hope to see something this year and anticipate that formal engagement with communities will start once we have a better picture of the government's funding and support and a framework for adaptation at the local level. It's a little bit rough, I guess, the timeframes for that, but we'll be working at least initially to get a good understanding of the impact on our own assets so that we can start to be making some decisions about potential areas that we need to avoid further development. So there are things that we can do in the meantime that won't require additional funding.
And through you, Madam Chair, we'll also obviously after phase 1 come back to council to report, and we can also give an update on anything that's come out of government, so we could possibly, have a talk about the timeframes at that stage as well.
Cool, thank you. Do we have any indication of if we're likely to be able to progress this much further this side of LTP? And I'm just thinking about funding implications. It feels to me like we might just miss that window. Does that mean that even if we're doing good planning now, it's probably going to be a few years before we're able to actually properly fund anything?
I can answer that if you like, through your chair. That's correct, Josh. We will miss this LTP funding round. In fact, we looked at it prior and realised we won't have good enough information to have meaningful conversations with our community. We would potentially create more ambiguity than we would certainty. If all goes well, we would be looking to go out next year with the community. At best, probably mid next year, at worst, late. We will come back to you with a call based on where the government's progress is looking as to whether you want to go before or wait for that moment.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah. And obviously, I guess that frustrating we have to wait a little bit, but definitely have the view that do it once and do it right. So that makes sense.
We do have a draft budget, so we will just tweak that and bring that to you for either an annual plan or the next LTP.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah. Otherwise, support this. Really happy. And thanks again for the workshops we went through on this.
Councillor Hayward.
Kia ora. Kia mana. Thank you for the report. Following on from Councillor Trillin's support for this item, I want to just tease out phase 2. What role has council played in proactively checking in with central government around their timeframes? Because it sounds as though at the moment we're just sitting on the fence waiting to see what they're going to say. Are we actually knocking on their door at least to ask questions about this sort of stuff?
Through you, Chair. We've made a strong submission, of which we put in on your behalf, and that's really the most proactive thing we've done, Councillor Hayward. We haven't had an opportunity to be involved in any working groups or given feedback, so we haven't done enough directly with central government outside of the public processes they've enabled us to do. Obviously, we'll look for those opportunities in any workshops we can be involved with. I'd default to the CE if she wanted to do anything more than that politically. Thank you.
Councillor Leggett?
Yeah, thanks for the report as well. I agree with the general tenor of the report. I just wondered, under phase 1, looking at doing a cost-benefit analysis, it seems like there are a whole lot of things that could be involved in there. Do we get to understand what our assumptions will be in the cost-benefit analysis? Because they can do anything you like, depending on the assumptions.
Part of the first phase will be about working with the asset managers to understand the primary assets that we are concerned about. We have some good information that will help us to make some good assumptions and decisions around that. But I think, as I said before, I think part of the first phase will be also about identifying information that we don't have and where we might need to do further analysis. Yeah.
In terms of the cost-benefit analysis, yes, definitely you'll see all the assumptions around that for sure. This is a lot of other councils, well, some other councils around New Zealand have already embarked on some adaptation projects. Very few of them have been successful, but Angela's very well connected and has talked, and I've been in meetings with other councils to have a look at the way that they've done things, and we've actually drawn out the learnings from some of those other projects, and some of them are things like making sure we're aware of our assumptions, making sure we've got all the right data and evidence up front to give options to council, etc., for choices around how we're going to manage things. So yes, we will do that in our reporting back.
Councillor, we happy?
Sorry, just leading on from that, and I know, Nick, you mentioned bringing a draft budget to us, but with phase 1, with it being paid from existing climate and environmental planning budget, can you remind us what that budget is?
The entire budget is around 85K. But some of that money is going to be used for different purposes, such as the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee adaptation things. So it probably is kind of around maybe 40K in this stage, I would say.
Any other? Yes, Councillor Fellow?
So just to clarify, is that the 83K just for phase 1? Or the 40K just for phase 1?
40K.
Okay, anybody else? No? All right, I'll put the report. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. 11.2, change to resource management delegations. I'll move it to put it on the table. Seconded by Councillor Hayward. Any discussion here from anybody? Yes? No? No hands? No? No good? Okay. What do you do, Councillor Leggett?
Well, just so that we're all really clear, I mean, I've read the paper and I agree with it. Just a very brief overview of
What's in the paper?
What's in the paper and why we're doing stuff, how it changes from before.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Leggett. So in a nutshell, we've got a scheme of delegation for RMA functions. It's worked to date because we've only been dealing with plan changes. Now that we've got a proposed district plan, we're facing a wave of a process in terms of appeals, mediation, and Environment Court pushes mediation type of processes. So what we're seeking is the ability to partake at staff level within those processes and to be able to actually actively engage, because at the moment the delegations sit with Nick and with the Chief Executive. And so obviously we don't necessarily want them involved in every single mediation directly, because there's going to be a number of them going on at any one time. But what we'll seek is, so provide the delegation, but then in the report we've set out there'll be a process by which we'll look at, flag up, say, key appeals that have high risk with them. And with that, we'll be looking at processes around how we manage that. And at that point, that might involve the delegation holders being above us, being involved. At any mediation, you tend to also be representative of lawyers as well, because of the nature of the process. So this is more of a way of trying to deal with something quite bluntly we haven't dealt with for 30 years, because last time was the mid-90s with the 1999 district plan. So it's just about trying to deal with this efficiently, and it's the expectation of the Environment Court as well that people involved in mediation will be able to actively get involved in the process and not always have to be referring back to someone else.
So it begged the question for me as well, with the change in government, what's happening to the Resource Management Act and all the hoo-ha around that? Can you cover that briefly? I know it's not exactly this paper, but it's germane.
In one sense, no change, because they've done away with the new legislation. So we're back to where we were.
Can I just, through you,
Yes,
Chair,
go
can
for
I
it.
just add a little bit more context? So the key focuses of the government at the moment are fast-track consenting. So they are aiming to take a bill on the 7th of March, which is based on the COVID fast-track legislation plus some. So they're including the Conservation Act, the Reserves Act, quite a few other acts that impede development. So it will so in a way the government's trying to get the fast-track consenting process broader in lieu of doing a full RM repeal while they're doing that. And they've also targeted Te Mana Otawai, so they're changing the hierarchy of obligations through the consenting process. So those are the two things, and that's about freshwater FM and widening out how that is applied. So they're the two key things that they're doing quickly, which we'll see in the resource consent space before we'll see anything in the policy space. We don't know enough yet. We haven't heard much about where they're heading on the policy space, except that they're repealing the Spatial Planning Act and the Natural Built Environment Act. So that's all I've really picked up and been briefed on at the moment. So fast-track consenting is the big push for the government at the moment.
Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, thanks for the report. Look, when I read through it, I took it that any officers that go into mediation know the parameters that their superiors would be wanting and how far they could go with it. So it just makes sense to me.
Yeah, through you, Chair, that's correct. So obviously we know what each appellant is trying to seek, where they are higher risk or have some consequences for the organisation. Wendy and I will set the scope for them to go into, and if they get pushed around that scope, we will be on standby to discuss whether that's a position we hold or we move. So, yep, absolutely.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'll move the paper. All those in favour? Those against, carried. To 11.3, the 40th anniversary of the sister city with Blacktown. I'll move it to put it on the table, knowing that I have an amendment in front of us. So seconded by, thank you, Councillor Waddle. So then I'll move to Councillor Leggett, who's got an amendment.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. Will you put that? I have an amendment. Well, it's in front of everyone. I thought you'd put it up on the screen as well. But it is in front of you. The amendment, to be specific, is an amendment to clause 4, which basically deletes the up to 3 additional councillors and adds a clause 5 to be specific that councillors may join the delegation by paying for the cost of their travel. Now, I do this. I support the tenor of this paper in terms of an ongoing relationship with Blacktown. I don't think it's something that we should back out of after 40 years, and I think there are benefits to it. However, all of us around the table know that in these times, with a challenging financial environment, and particularly with the LTP to consider, every dollar counts. And I believe that...
you can speak to it once you get a seconder.
Okay.
So can we get Councillor
Right.
Johnson second it? Okay, back to you, Councillor Liggett.
Right, I'll carry on.
Sorry,
I'll rabbit on.
formalities.
Yeah. This around $5,000, I'm thinking of, even though it's small, how many water leaks or potholes, asset investigations or other important things could we fund with this sort of thing? I certainly believe that the Mayor and others on this paper should be going, but any councillors who want to go, I think, should be able to pay for the cost of their own travel, or should have to pay for the cost of their own travel. So that's basically where I'm coming from in this.
Okay, so open it up for discussion of Councillor Liggett's amendment. Councillor Johnson.
I just think our residents have sent us some clear messaging on expenses, and we have an agreement. I think it's entirely appropriate that there's representation from the Mayor and Ngāti Toa. But in terms of the councillors, I feel it's completely reasonable that we pay for our own costs. And I think it's perhaps another thing that's quite transparent and that we can show we are being practical around projects like this, which can be considered surplus.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, are we happy?
Thank you. I will be supporting the amendment, but I note that it's more about the principle from my point of view. We all know that we can waste 5K as a council, regardless, but it also can be claimed back as a business trip as well. So just to put it out there, but yeah, definitely agree with, the Mayor and the kaumātua are going.
Thank you. Councillor Ford?
I too will be supporting the amendment from Councillor Liggett. I did just have some queries around, what's your wording of it? That councillors may join by paying for the cost of their travel. Do the councillors that are willing to pay for their own travel, are they able to, because we have a reimbursement policy, if they are eating there, I'm expecting they're not going to starve themselves while they're over there, but are they able to still, does the reimbursement policy then come into effect? So those costs will be covered by council.
I would have thought incidentals would have been covered, being food and transport. The accommodation is paid for by Blacktown.
So the wording is for the air flights. Is that what you're okay, cool. And then the other thing was just around the conversations that we've had around Blacktown, around Sister City, is what benefit do our people actually get from it. So it would be good to get a report when the delegation comes back around things like the delivery of the functions, the new way of doing things that we are going to actually implement, that we've learnt from our sister cities as well. Cool.
Anyone else want to speak? Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, it's all perception, isn't it? Like, you're going to get hung out to dry on it, no matter how much goes into it. Honestly, I don't see any benefits in the Sister City process, actually. I think I can't understand what we've done from it. I think my daughter went on the first trip over there, actually. She enjoyed the trip. It's a nice little junket. But honestly, if it were up to me, I would can it, I'd say. Look, I don't really see a place for it. We're going to have a really hard ask in this LTP where we're going to be scraping every dollar out of people. People that can't afford it, they'd like to go and visit their sisters as well probably, but can't afford to do it because their rates will be too high. So from my perspective, I support the amendment, but really I'd rather see the thing canned.
Anybody else want to speak to it? Yep, Councillor Fellow.
Mine's just really questions of clarification. In point 7, it says up to 2 staff members also travel with the delegation using the existing Sister City funding, but that this number depends on the likely work that is generated by the trip. So I just wanted to know what's an example of work that would be generated from this trip? I'd like to know that.
Wendy, do you want to answer that? Or are you coming up, Glenn? Oh, no, sorry. Which one? Reuben, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor, through the Mayor. We have 2 staff who are working with our sister city in Australia to organise the events and the proceedings there. It would be quite useful to have one of them who will be able to direct our team and organise our group that are going over if we do end up taking a group, for example, if a number of councillors do decide to pay for themselves to come over, so a coordinating person. But actually, in terms, I'm kind of thinking about what Councillor Ford had mentioned about those lessons learned. What would be really useful for officers is learning around the fire protections that have been put in place, particularly with the big fires that have happened in Australia, water quality, those types of things. That Blacktown are doing some really interesting things there because they are facing climate extremes before we are. There would be some really good learnings if officers were able to actually go over and learn some of those things. Otherwise, it is I'm not going to say junket, but you need people who can have some lessons learned while they're over there to bring back those benefits to Porirua.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Hayward.
Kia ora no whaihemana. I'm just mindful that I'm going to speak to the amendment, but I know that I'm assuming that you're going to just put the amendment and the substantive as one. Would that even be possible?
Put them separately? Or
Oh, no. I'm not foreshadowing any change. I'm in favour of supporting the amendment because, one, it is about reducing the amount of money that we spend on a project, so making sure that we actually are getting good bang for buck. Yeah. 2 other things. They have been already kind of illustrated already by other councillors. Councillor Weehuppi's point about demonstrating leadership and the principle of it, and I do sympathise with Councillor Duncan's view about the optics of this being bad, no matter which way this is going to be approached. I would say that we do have a sister city relationship with Blacktown as it is, and they did visit us recently as well. And I'm mindful of the tikanga of utu and also of manaakitanga. Now, it would be rude of us from a tikanga perspective, having welcomed Blacktown to come here and visit us, for reasons that are basically about pennies and pounds, not go and extend our friendship when we visit them in celebration of a significant milestone. We're not going every year, which is important. If there was something that I'd like the delegation to focus on, it would be around solid waste minimisation for a place like Blacktown. They do work on subsidies around waste diversion that I think may be useful insights for any report back to council. So if we were looking for some value, the approach we should take is what do we want our delegation to focus on, and not just be there merely for the purposes of the official part of the celebration, but actually to take on the challenge of learning something useful. Kia ora.
Thank you. I have struggled with this one, as you know. As a councillor, I've turned down trips to Blacktown and to Nishio before because I didn't see the sister city relationship as something that I was supporting. I know other people have been. And so when it came up, I was like, well, I'm not going. Well, as mayor, I don't have a choice. So I will be paying to take Phil because they brought their partners here and they're expecting that. I do think there is a bigger conversation at some point about our sister-city relationship, because next thing, Nishio and the other ones will pop up. And I do struggle with this one. So I think it is a conversation that we do have to have as councillors at some point, probably through a workshop. But I will go and do what I have to do as mayor, and that's my job. So, okay, I'll put the report and I'll put it. Oh, do you want to talk again? Because you're allowed to.
Yeah, just one final thing, and the two words that people have already used, it's about principle and perception. So that's why I moved the amendment. But I must say that when people talk about benefits of sister city relationships, there are some direct benefits which have already been touched on, potential benefits. However, I did go to Nishio many years ago on, which we paid for, my wife and I ourselves, with a ratepayers delegation that went with the mayor and others. And I have to say that if you want to talk about benefits, we, with the people we stayed with and others, we got some friendships there, and those people came to New Zealand, came to Porirua, spent money, added to the GDP here. So one of them came out and did training here as well in New Zealand. So there are some hidden things that you have to think about that are benefits that maybe not obvious in the first place, but they are beneficial when you count them overall. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Anybody else before I put the... No. Okay, so I'm putting the amendment and the paper together so that they change. All those in favour? All those against? It's carried. Thank you. We now move into public excluded. Moving to put it on the table. Seconded. Thank you, Councillor Hayward. All those in favour? Those against? Carried.